although you should know the tools and the standards and what you can do to be effective, the art of project management is knowing like, okay, for this one, I'm going to take a piece out of here and a piece out of there and wind up putting together something that actually works in a conversation. And also being willing to say like, okay, normally my charters don't include X, Y, or Z, but I know that that's really important for this particular project or person or what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it in there. Being willing to kind of stir the pot a little bit, it's almost like cooking, right? Like you can follow the recipe straight on, or you can add a little chili pepper, or you can add a little of your sriracha sauce, or you can throw in whatever it is that you like to spice it up or down a notch.
I'm hungry.
I know, right?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today we have Molly Beran with us. And Molly is a PMP certified project manager with over 20 years of experience managing projects and teams for clients that include Kaiser Permanente, Rush University Medical Center, the Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. Yeah, and various other financial and capital management firms. She blends her corporate training background with her experience in IT and project management to create processes and systems that break down complex problems and provide simple solutions that teams actually use to get things done, which I love because that's what it's all about. That is what project management is all about. So excited to have you here on the show today, Molly. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I am truly honored to be here. Very excited for our chat today.
Yay. And we're going to have a really good chat because Molly and I are going to get into like the nitty gritty of project management and not from like the technical side, from more of the art of project management, the side that we don't really talk about that much, or it's kind of complicated to talk about. It gets a little confusing, but it's so important for us to understand project management is both an art and a science.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go behind the scenes to talk about how you do that in your day-to-day project management. So let's start out with this one. Many of us as project managers have been trained to rely on tools, right? Tools and frameworks. We all know we need our toolkit. We need all that stuff. And don't get me wrong, that's important to have, to fall back on, and to have that shared language. But something you said in our last conversation really resonated with me. And you suggested that as project managers, we might need to think outside the toolbox. And I was like, ooh, yeah, I like that. So what does that mean for you? How do you do that?
So what that means for me is understanding that, just like you said, right, our standard tools and templates certainly have their time and place, right? If we're starting a project, probably going to write a charter. If we are trying to figure out who's involved, we're probably going to put together some sort of a stakeholder matrix or diagram or whatever. All of that's great. But I think when project managers, and I've especially seen this with like newly minted project managers, people who've just gotten their PMPs, when people cling too tightly to tools and standards, they wind up wasting a lot of time and energy, and also sometimes frustrating the people who are on the projects, right? Like if you are willing to live and die by the sword of a charter or a RAID log or whatever, and like that's all you care about is getting the tool created, you're kind of missing out on the bigger point. And the other thing that I just found practically true, I have managed projects where there was no charter. Maybe I came in late, no one ever made one. And rather than spend my time putting it together, maybe I sort of build it along the way, or we just jump off with an issues list or what have you. And those projects have been able to be done successfully. So, I tend to disagree with the PMI here a bit, wherein there seems to be sort of this like standard canon of things you must have on every project. And I don't believe that that's true. And furthermore, I think that there are some projects where you might have to make something up that's brand new.
Yes.
Because you've got stakeholders who want a communications plan that highlights the risks. So do I send them a risk register and a stakeholder matrix and a comms plan? No, they also want it on one PowerPoint slide that they can share with their leadership team. And it's like, what? That did my mind just break? So really understanding that although you should know the tools and the standards and what you can do to be effective, the art of project management is knowing, like, okay, for this one, I'm going to take a piece out of here and a piece out of there and wind up putting together something that actually works in a conversation. And also being willing to say, like, okay, normally my charters don't include X, Y, or Z, but I know that that's really important for this particular project or person or what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it in there. Being willing to kind of stir the pot a little bit, it's almost like cooking, right? Like you can follow the recipe straight on, or you can add a little chili pepper, or you can add a little of your sriracha sauce, or you can throw in whatever it is that you like to spice it up or down a notch.
I'm hungry.
I know, right?
No, that's so, yes, you are so on point, because what you're suggesting is that project managers really need to think critically about, what is this project? Who are my stakeholders? Who am I speaking to? Like, if I'm delivering information, who's my audience? Do these pieces of information make sense in the format, maybe that I've been trained to use? Or perhaps, do I not even need it? Could I use this in a different way and be more effective, more efficient? I have seen this so often with my projects too, because as I've shared on the channel, I work a lot with smaller teams, with startups. And when I get in there, there's usually not been a project manager. There's been no formal processes or anything like that. And to come in with like this big toolbox and say, okay, now we've been operating for so long without all of this. Let's implement all of these things and build an entire PMO. People, that doesn't work very well. It doesn't work very well, because you usually don't need all of that sort of red tape to begin with to get things done. There's very few tools often that we need to get things done. That's the reality of the matter.
Right.
Have you seen that as well?
Oh, big time. I mean, if I'm being honest, I think the most frequent tool I use in project management is email. Like, which you're writing from scratch almost every time anyway, right? So, like, especially these days, there are so many things that can help you write that email faster. Like, feed in a summary of your project to Copilot and ask them to describe it in 3 bullet points for a busy executive. That's great. Like, it's really about understanding what are the needs of this organization and how can I be effective, because otherwise you spend all your time building out this toolkit that no one ever uses. And like that just hurts my heart. Like, I want to be useful. I want to be a value add. And, don't tell the PMI this, but I have managed a project without a work breakdown structure. In fact, I didn't even make one ever until probably 2 or 3 years ago. That was the first time I ever made one. And yet I have done projects, and
yet you've executed, you've gotten things done, you've landed on time, you've landed on budget. It's funny that you bring that up, because I was just talking to another project manager who we all know and love, who I've had on the show as well. And he was saying he's managed like billion-dollar projects just with a whiteboard and email.
Absolutely.
And I think that is so important, especially for more junior project managers who are coming in and learning the craft, learning the skill of project management. Is like, yes, the tools are important, but so is simply understanding how to get things done, understanding how to organize, keep track of things, follow up, know how to prioritize. These are all skills that you sort of have to internalize, and there's not really a tool that's going to make that happen for you. There are tools that will help us think through those scenarios, but to actually make it happen, it's up to us. Now, I do have like a little toolkit. I have a little toolkit of things that I use almost every single time. I'm a big project charter person, but my project charters are so simple. Like, they're usually so simple. and just to get everyone on the same page and to set up
Mhm.
expectations. But as you said, if 9 times out of 10, when I'm brought in the middle of a project, there's no charter. There's never
Right.
been a charter, which can sometimes be the problem, but we
Right.
we could figure that out. And then other tools that we have that we learn about, I find this is a big hang up for more junior project managers too. They get so hung up on like a RACI or stakeholder matrix. Like we have these fancy names for things that are sometimes just a spreadsheet. It's a
Seriously.
list of names with emails. Like that's all it is. Come on,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
risk register.
Yeah.
What are they? Are they passengers on a ship? Why? Why do we call it that? It's. I'll tell you what. Risk list is hard to say. Risk list is hard to say, but a list of your risks, easier, I suppose. I mean, it just some of these terms, and I think therein belies another issue. When you put the tools forward and you sit down at a meeting and you say, well, actually, this is not on my risk register. And my stakeholder matrix, which is literally names and emails and maybe a contact preference type, right? Like my communications plan does not indicate that the frequency of this communication should be any more than I mean, people are going to tune you out. And that's the worst thing that a project manager can do is like be the hurdle or to be the burden. And I've gotten so much farther just by sitting down and being a human being with people. And I don't care what we call. I mean, I've managed projects where they wanted every decision documented, and I've managed projects where they specifically asked not to because no one wanted to be, held accountable in the long run. Or, it was maybe like sort of a secret confidential thing and nobody wanted it to be traceable. So like it's really about understanding that we can have a toolkit and we should. It saves me time. I've made a
Yeah.
thousand risk lists my entire career. I'm not changing the order of the columns I put them in every dang time. I'm always going to start from what's needed.
Yeah.
But inevitably, something comes up and you're like, oh, I need a little yes, no flag for this. And it had never happened before, but now here we are. I just rolled off a project a couple of months ago where we wound up having about 5 or 6 columns that were all yes, no, and they were all very important. And I'd never used them before, and I doubt I'll ever use them again. I can't even remember what they were, but I remember this spreadsheet, which was like 200 items long that we had to pivot table our way out of, like
Yes.
but understanding, like I was working with a team that was very used to doing accounting. So they wanted the details. They wanted the detailed spreadsheet. They could work a pivot table way better than I ever could. And so it was up to me to be flexible and provide an avenue that worked for them. And I think the statistic that most resonates with me about project management is that it's like 90% communication.
Yes.
And I'm counting this type of work as communication work. It's me understanding these are numbers people I'm dealing with. I got to give them numbers versus, my other teams where maybe they're much more about the team spirit and how do we function together. And there it's about making sure I'm at the meetings and that I'm available for questions or that I'm responsive when they ask for things. Right. So it really does, I think, become about the art and the humanity and the communication of it all rather than the risk register.
Absolutely. And the project managers who understand that are the ones that by far and away are just excelling in this
Mhm.
career, because there is so much automation also that's happening with these other
Yeah,
things. It's like, okay, like you said, you can plug things into AI tools to build a risk register, right?
sure.
To make it like you can plug that all in. It's really
Yeah.
easy. And so now the skill that's becoming important for project managers is really around, like you said, communication, critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
forward thinking,
Oh, yeah.
understanding how we need to perhaps adapt to situations that are occurring, are going to occur. That's where the real skill lies. And I just see there's a lag between what's being taught to project managers to become certified or whatever. I'm not going to pick on anybody, but
Sure.
like, yeah, there's just a lag between the information that's being taught to become a project manager and what it actually takes. And I know a lot of conversation that we see on LinkedIn is around that sort of
Yeah.
gap
Yeah.
of um, the technical, like you're saying, the art versus the science, the technical versus the human aspect. And so I
Yeah.
love that we're talking about it today.
Yeah. Same. Same. And it's so interesting too when you think about it because project management has its origins in 1950s manufacturing and military, right? So, of course, it has been highly focused on detailed scoping and standards and processes and tools, et cetera, and so forth. But, it's now 2024. The things that made 1950s manufacturing run and go well is not necessarily the same thing that it takes to help a cybersecurity team get their work done or a nonprofit to help students, navigate through various college systems or whatever your line of business happens to be, right? So it's not surprising that there is that gap. And I'm just really curious to see how organizations like the PMI and other accreditation folks actually navigate that gap and where do we go? And to its credit, I think the PMI has done a good job of embracing things like emotional intelligence and some of these more humanistic elements of what it is that we do. And I think too that the more we do that, the more and more valuable project managers are going to be seen. And the more elevation we'll have in terms of leadership. So actually having like a chief project officer. I know that Antonio Nieto Rodriguez, he talks about this all the time, having a chief project officer and elevating the ranks of what we do. So I really think that is like where we're headed or where we ought to be headed or where we could be headed, provided we all sort of get on board with being both artists and scientists.
Yeah. Yeah. I read an article by him. It's been, I think it's a couple years old. You've probably read this article too, and it really resonated with me about the way of the future and things becoming more projectized. And yeah, I've referenced that a few times here on the
Yeah.
channel because I think it's so relevant. I like that you called that out. And yeah, I agree. It's not 1950 anymore.
Hello. Okay, Boomer, we can change how we manage projects. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. Let's move on to our next topic, which I think we've already kind of touched on a little bit, but
Mhm.
we could dig in a little
Great.
bit more. We could
I
dig
love
in
it.
a little bit more. So, like we were talking about, we have toolboxes, right? But something that I like to do when I'm approaching my projects, and especially as a consultant, I know you're consulting as
Mhm.
well. When we're meeting with new teams, it's really important not to walk in with that big toolbox and say, like, okay, I'm the project management consultant, and now we have 50 pages of work that everyone needs to fill out every week, right? I
Right.
I am not that person. And that is one of the first things that honestly that teams ask me is we've worked with a project manager before. They had us do all this busy work, all this extra work. Are you going to be the same way? And I'm not. I really pride myself on being somewhat minimalist because, like you said, sometimes we can manage those projects just with a whiteboard, just with email,
Mhm.
etc. So, with that being said, if we're saying it might sound to some people like we're saying, we don't really do all that much. We don't use risk registers. We don't we don't use communication plans. We don't even need project charters. They might be saying, well, what exactly do you do as a project manager? Are you just emailing and on the phone all day? And what kind of value does that add? So I just want to dig into that a little bit more because I know that might be a question that some folks have as they are
Yeah.
listening to this.
Oh, of course. And let it be said, I don't think you need no tools. I think you need some. I think you need to right size it to meet the needs. And I really view the project manager's job as being the communicator in chief for your project, and also to some degree the champion in chief for your project. So it's really about understanding that you're going to have some set of tools that help you manage the project. You're going to have some set of tools that help add transparency to the work. I think that's like the key value add of project management is that you break up the work and then you can see exactly who's doing what, when are they doing it, and then help the organization understand when they can get certain things done or how they will get certain things done. And that in and of itself is a very big value add, I would say, especially from an operational standpoint. Um, but the other added benefit of a project manager, I think you have to maintain this perspective of champion in chief, communicator in chief, everywhere that you show up in an organization. So, especially when you are a direct employee, you might be sitting in a meeting for something else. Maybe it's your monthly all hands meeting. Maybe it's about documentation that people need to get out. Maybe it's your little team that you all report to the same manager, what have you. And people are going to talk. People are going to talk about what's going on. They're going to talk about initiatives, et cetera. It's your job to be listening from the perspective of your project or projects, because let's face it, most of us manage multiple, right? And so I just vividly remember in the past, I would be at an all hands weekly meeting in an IT department, and somebody would be talking about what they're doing, and it's cool. And like I could be off checking my email, but I start to listen and I start to hear, oh, they are taking thus and such system down over the weekend. We were going to push out a bunch of changes on Friday. I better connect with them and see like exactly what time does your outage start? Mm-hmm. Who is doing it? Are there any exceptions to what might be able to go live? Sometimes you hear about things that are coming up. We've got this regulatory thing, so there's going to be a 3-week build freeze, and you're like, excuse what? That is actually going to impact me a lot. Or maybe you've got a new executive coming on board, somebody who may or may not have the same understanding of what it is that your team is doing or why they're doing it. So it's really important that the PM be listening for whatever it is that's being said and how it impacts you, because you're not always going to have it wrapped up for you in a nice little bow that somebody's like, oh, knock, 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 project manager. I know that this affects you, so here it is. That's not how it happens. You have to be that like sleuthy listener who is understanding, what does this mean for my project and what does this mean for the work we're trying to get done, and then figure out what you're going to do about it, right? It goes back to that whole, how do we focus on being proactive? And I think a lot of that actually comes from listening intently from the perspective of your project.
What you're saying right here is key to excelling as a project manager. And it's also why I believe it's so important for beginner project managers to have either someone that they're learning under or working with, or a mentor that they can talk to, because this is the kind of stuff where you really have to kind of see it in action to usually you do. I mean, some people are just, they think like that from the get-go. And I'm always really impressed when I work with folks
I for sure did not.
I didn't either.
This was a learned skill.
Same. Yeah, I did not either. I was slightly clueless, but but that's why it's so important for everyone. I mean, I have a mentor now that is a few steps ahead of me. So finding someone who you can bounce things off of and say like, hey, I was in this meeting. Would it be appropriate for me to speak up about this thing? Or I think this might impact my project. Is it my responsibility to say that, or is it someone else's? I always like to say, if there's any sort of a light bulb moment for you, then it's probably worth exploring. Like if you hear something and there's some sort of a flag that goes off, don't ignore that. It's probably worth it for you to see. But the other thing you were sort of touching on is the strategic element of project management. We hear that word a lot. It's like, be strategic. What does that mean? Yeah. But really it means, like you said, being able to see all the little different pieces and how they might affect each other, and how you might have some responsibility in rearranging or moving those pieces to accomplish things in a more efficient way, to, like you were mentioning, there was a system that was going to be offline. Okay, I should probably take an action here to make sure that we're covered. These are the sort of strategic moves that we can make as project managers that will really solidify our value to the teams. And that's what, this question is all about. If we're not doing that project manager stuff, like filling out forms all day long, walking around with a clipboard, what exactly are we doing to add value? And just like you said, we're making smart decisions and having conversations that are intentional. We're listening carefully to make sure we can stay on top of these issues that frankly can totally derail a project, can cause some really big issues.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's I think where the experience comes into play, because I have seen what happens when you sit in a meeting and don't think critically about what's happening, and then 2 weeks later you wonder why this thing didn't get done on your project. It's like, that outage, the one that I was literally told was coming. Oh, I guess I probably should have done something about that, right? Like, it only takes one or two of those before you start to realize that you could be getting your updates from anywhere. And it's not about like just attending your project meetings and thinking that's where the work gets done. No, no, no. It's really much bigger and broader than that, especially when you're embedded within an organization.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm really curious because I've been in a situation before where I know there's a lot of that sort of work that I've done that
Mhm.
maybe has gone under the radar. I've listened, I've taken action, but I don't raise my hand and say, I'm really bad about that anyway. I don't raise my hand and say, oh, I did this thing and I saved the day.
Mhm.
So you might get 3 months down the road, and depending on whether you're a contractor or you're an employee, whoever is overseeing you might have a review session with you to say, okay, how exactly have you helped us? I often forget all of that little stuff that's
Yeah.
happened in between. How do you keep track of it? Do you keep track of it? How do you make sure that that doesn't get totally forgotten and fly under the radar so that you can really prove your value when the time comes?
So I have a couple of strategies. Back in the day when I was an employee, I would keep a running list of things that I thought went well. So in all likelihood, when something like that happens, a little reminder bell would kind of ding in my head and say like, "Hey, you got to go write that down." So that, I think, real time tracking is one of the best ways to really keep. So just start a OneNote, put a page in
Yeah.
there for the stuff you're doing. I used to do that also when I was managing teams. So I would have a section for every person. And I'd have the first tab of that just to be like recognition and stuff that I wanted to remember throughout the year. Because I just found that it was way too hard to remember in December what someone had done in March. So I try to do that in real time. And I think that that's the best method that I've found for making sure that doesn't get lost. The other thing I do is when I get an email from somebody that acknowledges work that I've done or is a thank you or something good, I will move that into a little keep folder. And that used to be like when it was a hard day at work, I would pull it out and read it on a rainy day to sort of keep going. But I think in this instance, you could also use those as, sort of fodder for any type of review. Because generally speaking, I have found that if somebody knows that something's happening or they see that I caught this particular thing, usually people will make some sort of an acknowledgement, especially if you've got somebody who understands how hard it is to be a project manager and wants to like recognize you for the work that you're doing. So in those instances, I think it's totally fine to keep recognition that you get from others and to cite that later on as more evidence of what you did to help.
I like it. And again, it's a simple solution. Simple solution. Just save the stuff to a folder.
Yeah.
Make a list. Start a like you said, a OneNote, a spreadsheet, whatever it is. Just make a
Yeah.
list.
Oh yeah. I'm not solution like committed here. If you want to have like a post-it, fine. Like we can keep this pen and paper. We can put it on a whiteboard in
Take
your
a picture of
office.
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And then make a little album called Recognition so that you don't lose it in your 9 other things that you took a photo of today to try to remember tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, no. You are not alone. I mean, make a
Yeah,
Pinterest board. I don't
I
know,
have so
whatever
many.
it is.
How do you, uh, yeah, I need a consultant for all of I'm sure we all do, all the emails, all the photos. I don't even know. But it is funny because when I go in to work with teams, I am very organized. I think the way I think is very organized and structured,
Mhm.
but I'm just a person like everyone else trying to navigate all of this digital
Oh my
stuff.
gosh.
I
Yes.
have so much data in my life at this point, but people will say like, "Ooh, what's your secret? What's your solution?" I'm like, "I don't have one. I have a to-do list just like everyone else, a task
Hmm.
list. It's
Hmm.
literally a list." And then I show them and they say, "Oh, it's just a list." I'm like, "It sure is. It's just a list." And I just mark things off.
Sure is. Sure is. Yeah. Yeah. And
It's
that's
you would be I don't know, maybe you get that question a lot too, but it's
yeah.
just funny to me how often people are like, "Show us how you get things done. What does your
Yeah.
task list look like?"
Yeah. I use Post-it. I put the 3 most important things I have to do every day on my Post-it. When it's done, I rip it off and I throw it in the recycle bin. That's what I do.
I love it.
That's what I do.
I do something similar, except for I just jot it down on my screen and I'm like,
Okay,
okay.
great. You are saving paper and I applaud you. I can't get over the satisfaction of ripping that Post-it off and crumpling it up and throwing it in the recycle bin. God, it feels so good. It just feels so
It it is a good feeling. Yesterday, my daughter and I were finishing our Christmas shopping and dropping off our gifts and all of that.
good. Hmm.
And so she likes to, we were just talking about this. She made the list. She said, "Mom, what's everything we have to do? Because I want to write it down and then I want to be able to cross it off." I was
Oh,
like, "Girl, yes."
I love her.
Yeah.
I love her.
And she's in the back seat. She's like, "And we crossed that one off." And like, it's really dramatic.
It's like, I'm so glad that she relishes it. I've never met a person who doesn't like checking things off their list. Like, show me the person who's like, no, I just want an empty to-do list with everything on it still. Undone. I've never met a single person who's like, that's so calming. Oh,
No, no, and I really like how you focused on three things.
yeah.
It's that I think is the key to moving forward in work and in life. Don't put too much on there. Three things is perfect. It's
Yeah, I mean
perfect.
it's really like borrowing from agile methodology of a work in progress limit, right? Like I have more than 3 things I have to do every day. Of course I do. We all do. Like you gotta make the bed and have lunch and all this stuff. But by taking your 3 most important, you are focusing your intention. And also, like the cool thing about it is, especially when I get really stressed or have a lot going on, it really feels very satisfying. And it also like helps calm any sort of like anxiety spirals you might be having because you see these are the 3 most important things. And if it's 2 o'clock and I haven't done them, well, now's the time. Like, let's make it happen. And if it's noon and they're done, it's just like, man, I'm a friggin' rock star today. This is great. But it's,
Hmm.
it's not about getting everything done. It's about really getting the most important things done and then building your skills and capacity at doing that. Because the more days in a row you can say, oh, I got those 3 done. Oh, I got those 3 done. The more confident you get in your abilities to really focus and get the most important things done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also feel like the older I've gotten,
Mm.
um,
Mhm.
Molly and I are sort of birthday twins, by the
We
way.
are.
Yeah. The older I've gotten, the less I will like frantically try to do all of the things on the list. The more I'm just like, three things is good. And, I always try to do something for my health and well-being,
Mhm.
for my family, three things for work, three things for personal. And it's like, okay, just as you said, There's always a ton more stuff that could be done. There's endless things that we can do, but make it easier for yourself and just stop stressing.
And I will say that I do know that there are certain factors that can make even that seemingly very, very easy methodology not a great one. So I do have several like neurodivergent friends who find it really difficult, even with just a 3-thing list, or like the thought of getting those 3 done makes them panic and procrastinate even more. So I will say it may not be the silver bullet for everyone, but it is something that I've been able to do to really help me focus on my intention and to ensure that I get those things done. And you know, there might be better solutions out there for other folks as well. And it's just something that I found personally.
I love that. Yeah, there's a solution for everyone. It doesn't have to look all the same because we're all different.
Right, exactly.
Okay, let's move on to our third question. I'm refreshing my memory here. Ah, yes, this is a good one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are both consulting. We are project managers, you and I both. We are project managers. We've done a lot of work in the past with various organizations, and now we're both consultants. And one of the things that I know we both encounter as consultants, which we should, because we're experts in what we do, that's how our clients are viewing us, right? So they're looking to us to really make sharp recommendations when it comes to what's the best way to manage this project, what sort of tools do we need to use, et cetera. So I'm curious, given your experience, I know you've recognized some patterns, maybe seen some signs when you go in and you start working with companies where you're like, aha, I can tell that this is maybe a problem from not having clear communication in the beginning regarding expectations, or maybe this is an issue with not having a work breakdown structure, whatever it is. What are some of those signs or patterns that you've seen, and how do you make those decisions to provide recommendations to your clients?
Absolutely. I think one of the very first flags that you can see in an organization is when everybody has a different idea about what this project is supposed to do. So that, of course, can come from many different root causes, but most typically, I find like the right tool to solve that is actually a charter, but it's not that the charter solves the problem. It's that having the conversations required to get down the who, what, where, when, and most importantly, why of a project. That is the work that needs to be done to get everybody in alignment about why we are doing this project. Now, everybody still might have their own individual goals. Maybe Josh over here wants a promotion, and maybe Susan over here wants to improve the technology that we're using or what have you. That's fine. I'm not talking about people's like pet projecty things that they want to accomplish. I'm talking about when one person thinks, oh, we're completely redoing our data warehouse structure, and someone else thinks, oh, we are putting in SharePoint. And you're like, this is not the same project at all. You know, and for non-technical people, it's like one person thinks you're building a bridge and one person thinks you're building a school. It's like, wait, what? No, this is what? So, you know, I think that that's a case where the right tool I would recommend is to have a charter, but the work I would recommend is having conversations that will yield, why are we doing this? What is the business rationale? What are our desired outcomes? What does done look like? I just rolled off of some calls this morning where I'm working with an organization to start building in some of this like project intake processes and structures. And that's the key thing that everyone's saying. It's like, nobody knows what done looks like. Nobody knows what the deliverables are. Nobody knows like what are the key business drivers behind thus and such projects. So for me, you know, when you land in an organization and people disagree on what this project is meant to do, that means those kinds of conversations and consensus building hasn't sufficiently well happened. And the tool that you can offer is a charter, but the point is to get leadership on the same page enough to actually produce a charter with answers that everyone agrees to.
Yeah, and that can be really tricky too, especially if you have I've been involved in organizations before where maybe you have two different leaders or two different key players, and you can't ever get them in the same room together because their schedules are all crazy. And so you get one directive from this person and another from this person, and they're like, don't we want the same thing? Like, I talked to that person last week and we were on the same page, and you can't ever get those people on the same page. How would you handle that?
Yes. I would handle that by, and so I'm going into this one saying we've exhausted all options. We've tried to get them to meet together and they will not, cannot, whatever it is. In that case, I love a good trusty decision document. And what that is
Is this
again,
a tool?
it is a tool. It is a tool. But the point is not to produce the tool. The point is to document, what does person A want? What does person B want? Where are their commonalities? What do I recommend? So when I'm a consultant, I'm going to say, like, what's the situation? What's the background? What are the options? What do I recommend? And then, like, this is a great time, I think, probably for a three-way Teams chat where you can like email the document or send it to them in Teams and be like, hey guys, I need your help in making this decision. Why are we doing this project? I've heard this, I've heard that. We need to come to an agreement here. And it's the conversation. And I think too, what you described as a situation where no one has ever talked to all three people together, right? So one person talks to person A, one person talks to person B. Maybe they talk to each other, but the three of you have still never gotten on the same page. So some degree of getting people on the same page. And I find that page usually within the confines of what I would call a decision document. You can also like do fancy things in Teams also by asking for approval, right? So, and if the approval is like, you agree with my recommendation, cool. And once you have it, then you need to use that tool to direct how the project goes, right? So it's really about getting transparency around the disagreement, establishing what the agreed upon decision is, and then most importantly, taking that decision and making sure it spreads throughout the rest of the communications, tasks, work streams, whatever you have going on with the project.
I like that you're really focusing on facts too. It's like that's what this decision document is like,
Right.
what did person A want or state? Person B, what do I recommend given the information that I know? Keeping it to the facts instead of like, hey, get a hold of this person. And I think, I think this is what I hear a lot of that. I hear a lot of that when I'm doing coaching. And often what I'm always trying to bring it back to is like, we need to focus on the facts and the data at hand instead of, I mean, it's valid that you feel frustrated that you can't get the people in the same room, but we have to be focused on facts, data, solutions. And I think that's a fantastic strategy for addressing this situation, which I know happens to folks often.
Yeah. And, I think that that's an important note. In the project management role, I think everybody needs to come to grips with the fact that you are going to feel frustrated. Like, I have never had a project that I was like, easy breezy, everyone agrees, this is fantastic. Like, frustration is a baseline assumption. And the fact that you feel it is totally, like, that's valid. Of course you are feeling it, but it doesn't actually necessarily mean anything. Like, it doesn't necessarily move the needle. You don't necessarily need to like communicate every little inch of your feeling to leadership, because like, let's just go in knowing you're gonna feel some frustration. And of course you are, right? Like, you've been trying to get a hold of person A and person B and no one will talk to you. It is frustrating, but it's also not relevant to what we're trying to do here. And so like, I do think it's important for you to find somebody who you can vent to and, to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it, and you don't cover it up, but it's, there are productive ways that we can deal with that and get to a resolution. And sometimes it just requires taking that frustration and like putting a pin in it, coming back to it later, or, talking to a friend or a spouse or whomever, who will care about your frustration and venting. But these two people probably don't. Like, they're the cause of it. They know it. It is what it is.
They've
Like,
got their own stuff that they're dealing with.
why do you
And
think they're avoiding you so hard,
yeah.
right? Like, there are definitely reasons why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And you know what? You're hitting on something that is so near and dear to me because I've been doing this as a solo endeavor since 2020. So
Mm-hmm.
going into year 5.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, it can feel lonely. It sure can. And I think for anyone out there who's considering doing this, that's fantastic. First of all, it could be very rewarding. You can
Mm-hmm.
meet amazing people like Molly.
It's super fun.
It's
Also, like,
super
it's really
fun.
fun.
You grow. Like I always tell everyone, in 1 year as a consultant, I kid you not, I probably learned more than like 5 or 10 years as an
Oh yeah,
employee. It's
absolutely.
it is wild. You can grow so fast if you're open to it. But um, hair in my mouth. But it can be insanely isolating. It can feel very lonely. You can feel, certainly if you're working with a team that maybe isn't the most pleasant to work with, or you're having a lot of issues and you don't have anyone you can speak to on that team, which as a consultant we usually, that's like you said, it's not our place to voice our concerns and frustrations. We are there to solve problems and to get things done. But unless you have someone that you can talk to, a mentor, multiple mentors, hop on LinkedIn, start meeting people. That's what I did. Create your own kind of like water cooler, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's so important because you really can't, I guess you could do it alone, but there's so many benefits to broadening your network as a
Mm-hmm.
consultant, not only for
Mm-hmm.
business opportunities, but also just for sanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of different ways you can solve for that. All of the strategies you mentioned are great. You can also do things like join a mastermind, which is something that I have chosen to do as an entrepreneur. And actually, the host of my mastermind you've had on your podcast, Laura Khalil.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
it's, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Love
So,
Laura.
I love her too. And that group, which she calls Elevate, has been really foundational for me in terms of understanding, how do I want to design my business model as a consultant? What can I say? Like, what can I say no to? And it's just having people to bounce that kind of stuff off of. And, yeah, even to vent sometimes. It's been really helpful for me. And, for me, I also like a program and a structure. So a mastermind is a great option for people who want to do that. But like you said too, like, meeting friends on LinkedIn is totally free. And you can meet some really cool people. There's a lot of great conversations happening on LinkedIn about project management and issues therein. What, so you scroll through, find somebody who's talking about it, shoot them a DM. I mean, most people are willing to take even, a 20-minute little coffee chat, and you can really get a lot of wisdom and knowledge sharing through that free type of networking. Also, networking happens in paid events too. So things like Chamber of Commerce's
Yes.
for other local consultants. If you happen to be like a Microsoft certified partner, they've got avenues of things, right? So like technology focused things, location focused things. There's a lot of ways for folks who work solo to get that sort of water cooler situation in their lives.
Yeah. And we need it.
We
We
do.
absolutely need it. And like I said, I've made so many amazing connections, so many amazing friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm like, yes, very optimistic about the future of consulting.
Same. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Molly, it's always so great talking to you. Thank you for being
Likewise.
here with us today. I would love it if you could share with folks where they can find you, a little bit more maybe about what you do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So you can't find me on LinkedIn, Molly Beran, Beran. You can also find me at projectsbymolly.com. There I have a blog that has a lot of random musings about project management and things that I've done well. I also have a resource library with some of those tools that we talked about, which I would advise you to use at your own discretion. I also write a newsletter, which you can sign up for on my website. So always love to have new folks reading and new ideas, etc. So that's where you can find me. And then a little bit more about what I do. So I am really focused on helping organizations implement project management in the best ways that they can for their size and state. So sometimes that looks like doing implementations of systems like Asana or MS Planner or Microsoft Project, or pick a tool. I'm pretty agnostic about it, but I help folks kind of think through, what do we need to decide on before we do this? How are we going to train people? I'll often deliver training and then do some follow-up work. But then I also help design processes that live outside of necessarily computer systems, about how do we decide what projects are important enough to do? How do we assign resources to those projects? What kind of a workflow can we build or put together to make sure that all the people who need to contribute to this work of getting a project done know about it, have what they need, and can launch it successfully, and then also manage and track it successfully. I'm a little bit obsessed with data and reportability and transparency, so I do a lot of work with making Power BI reports that surface all of this detail in a way that's actually easy to see what's getting done, and making sure that we get to good decisions about what should continue to be done.
You have a broad skill set.
Thanks.
And yeah, no, it's great. A lot of value: project management, process management, data management, analysis, all kinds of good stuff. Molly
Totally.
is amazing. Thank you again for being here with us. I'm going to link everything you just listed, all of those resources. I'll link that in the video description. So if folks want to find you, they can just click the link. And yeah, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Kayla. It was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.